So you're saying of the 16% of SMEs operating within the UK who are from the Black and ethnic minority groups, we only account for less than 1% of procurement expenditure? I mean, please.
Okay, so
underscore that for me, please.
So in the public sector, there was a report done in 2021 by an organisation called Delight, and they said that less than 1% of the £2.9 billion which is spent on procurement per annum is spent with ethnic minority businesses. Now, what I was saying here is that in terms of small, medium enterprises, SMEs, 16% of those SMEs in the UK are represented by Black, Asian, ethnic minority businesses. So we, as ethnic groups, if you like, as aggregated, we represent 16% of SMEs, but yet still less than 1% of the expenditure is given to Black, Asian, ethnic minority companies. Now, why is that relevant? Now, that's just the public sector. We're not talking about the private sector because we don't have access to that data. But when I talk about entrepreneurship, why was I fascinated? When I look at our outcomes as Black and African Caribbean diaspora, we look at outcomes in terms of business outcomes, in terms of whether it's profitability, sales. Now, bearing in mind, the average Black businesses, African Caribbean turnover, I'm talking about revenue now, sales, is circa 26,000 per annum in the UK. So that's your sales. That's not talking about your costs. So when you think about your revenues, 26,000 average, don't take me wrong, there are lots of brilliant businesses that are turning over multi-million pounds worth of business, and that's great. And we applaud and salute those, but we want more of those.
Absolutely.
And of course, if 26,000 is the average, there are clearly some learning less than that. So if you think 26 is your average, you then have to take away what's the cost of running that business: electricity, light bill, car rent, telephone bills. So when you take away that cost, you're probably just about making a profit or not making a profit at all.
Not making a profit. Yeah.
So that's a challenge. So for me, when I ask the question, well, what can we do differently? Actually, we want to have better access to the supply chain.
Yeah.
Because there's a way of opening up real opportunities for sustainable growth.
Yeah.
Now, there's some data. There was a Target in America, is one organization where they have demonstrated, even though they've got a large, I think they have circa 6,000 different suppliers. But what the data is telling us today is that companies who invest in diversity, and more specifically, not just gender diversity, but race diversity, are more likely to get a better return on investment. They have improvements in performance, they have improvements in productivity, and most importantly, have improvements in profitability.
Yeah, so because of that innovation you were talking about.
Yeah, so in other words, if you are engaging and accessing diverse businesses for your business performance improves.
Absolutely.
So now, we can always talk about the moral argument, and that should always be given. But actually now I'm saying, what about the commercial argument? What's good for your business?
Yeah.
So
it works both ways.
Yeah. So when I used to sit in the boardroom every 3 months, and we have to sit in front of the chief executive talking about our business and talking about our performance, he was interested in the bottom line. So what I'm saying here, the data tells us now that having more innovative, diverse businesses within your supply chain will help your business grow and improve in performance, productivity, and profitability. So it makes commercial sense.
Yeah.
So as I said, we can make the moral argument. Of course, we need to do that. But equally so, if you're in business, what's your purpose? And part of that is making a profit. Yes, satisfying customer needs.
Absolutely.
All of that's important. But equally so, you're there to demonstrate and give a return to your shareholders and stakeholders. So yeah. So that's why I think it's really, really important that we look at the supply chain and how do we get access to those supply chains.
Yeah.
Now, a really interesting study was done in 2017, It was called the Impact Assessment Study by MSD UK, which are the largest minority supplier diversity organisation in the UK.
Yeah.
And they do lots of great repository. They've got lots of great research, which they do. And at one stage, one of the reports they looked at is when they asked their corporate members, bearing in mind what MSD UK do is to try and to facilitate greater access to diversity businesses within the corporate space. So that's what they're trying to do, which is great. And they do an excellent job of doing that. But one of their reports, when they did a survey of some of their corporate members some time back, and this could be the 2017, but it could also be the 2012 report. I can't remember exactly which one it was. But at one point in time, their corporate members said, 36% of their corporate members said that they perceive that minority businesses would be less than capable than some of their current suppliers. So that was a perception.
Yeah.
Even without knowing. But so what does that tell you then? It says that access to the supply chain is difficult. It's difficult because the perception is already saying you may not be good enough, even before you go through the door.
Yeah.
That's one part of it. But equally so, the other part is, which I discovered in my own study, is the structures that organizations have in place can be counterintuitive and prohibitive. So in other words, you know, Colin could be the most expert IT guy, technically wizard, and he could be working in a corporate organization for 20 years. So he decides, actually, I'm going to do it on my own. And he steps out of that organization tomorrow, having worked with all of these various corporates for 20 years, but steps out on his own back and says, actually, I'm going to go and approach those companies to do it for myself. And so when he has to fill in this pre-qualification questionnaire, he no longer has the expertise, experience in their eyes, or expertise or backing to tender for that business. But 2 days ago, he was more than capable of doing that. So often the supply chains are often quite restrictive and prohibitive because they're so structured in a particular way and they're systemic. So there needs to be a deconstruction, a dismantling of how they look at supply chain and give better access to opportunities.
So just to be clear, we're potentially talking about structures, so business structures. So this IT whiz might decide to just set up as a sole trader. However, the supply chain is stipulating that it needs to be a limited company or a partnership with 5 years of accounts. So all of that personal credibility and experience means nothing because he no longer has the structures to support that application.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's one side of the coin. And then if you think about, if you want to grow a business, any type of business, if you want to grow as an entrepreneur, you need to scale. You need investment to scale.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if you can't get access to the finances, it makes it very difficult for you to grow. So it's a real dichotomous position that you're in. Okay, so now there are other, there are lots of different organizations such as Impact X Capital with Eric Collins' organization. There is Lendo with Debbie. There is Cornerstone with I can't remember his name for the top of it, but there's lots of organizations now who do look at VC lending and venture capitalists who are willing to invest, which are run and owned by black entrepreneurs, because they recognize there's a need to support those innovative businesses that can do it and are doing it, and are giving good, and also at the same time they're giving good returns on their investment.
In fact, that was another less than 1% story, where within the VC or venture capital structures or industry, less than 1% of all venture capital funding went to, in fact, I like a term that you've introduced, which I've not heard of before you actually, BACD, Black and African Caribbean Diaspora. And I'd love you to unpack that. But basically, within the venture capital world, less than 1% were going to those groups.
But also, if you're from an intersectionality perspective, if you're Black female, it's even lower.
Even less, It's
even lower. I think it's 0.002. It's really low. from a female perspective. But a lot of the reporting, and the reason why I looked at the Black Entrepreneur Report was because a lot of the reporting was very homogenized. It was about Black, Asian, minority, ethnic, and I'm not saying other groups don't have the same challenges, but it was important to shed a light on what was going on specifically to the Black African Caribbean diaspora, because in every major matrix, you can see indicators. The Black African Caribbean diaspora we're getting less access, we're performing worse than, we're getting less opportunities. And it's important to raise that and keep that awareness going and try and open up those doors for opportunity. Because if we then open up those doors and we can start to have more sustainable business, and you're not earning 26,000, you're earning 260,000 or 2.6 million. And that way you have a more sustainable model. And that's what we need to think about doing. How do we transition ourselves to get access to those opportunities? So